torn between two worlds, two fates, two women.
Who are you?
William Shakespeare.
Never heard of you.
I have a play.
Of any quality?
I think so.
You can't just make up words! Someone must.
Money. Power. Greatness.
You see, it's all just theatre.
Theatres must be destroyed once and for all.
The danger is real.
I am no coward.
Nor was the man executed yesterday.
You plan to write a play about the most dangerous man in England.
Better to die on our feet than live on our knees. You all have created a place where a common man can become a king. The time has come for us to fight for what we believe in. We are at war, and our only weapons are words.
I will write plays
That question how we love, why we fight. What is human? Who knows what secrets lie within men's souls?
Let's keep it going for Olivia, everybody.
Hi.
What a way to kick off Tuesday morning with a little Shakespeare.
I know, right? Not bad.
So you star in this origin story about William Shakespeare called Will on TNT.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those who might be a little Shakespeare-averse after some traumatic English class moments in high school,
You and me both.
tell us a little bit about it and maybe why people who aren't so familiar with Shakespeare's work, would tune in.
Of course. Will sort of follows the early days of William Shakespeare before he became William Shakespeare, and sort of follows his journey as he was an everyday person, as Will. He comes to London, he's finding his feet, he meets this girl, Alice Burbage, and they sort of fall in love, and they're both trailblazers of the time, and the show just explores everyone's passion for life, love, theatre, and politics, and sort of following what you love, which is super exciting.
It is. I've seen the first 3 episodes, and it's such a bold, original take on the story. And we don't know a lot about William Shakespeare from history, so there's an endless amount of possibility here.
That's sort of what is really special about the show, is that it's sort of history is really how you interpret it, and what Craig and Shaker have really done has sort of taken history as we know it and flipped it on its head and made it really sort of relatable and sort of puts it in a way that we can sort of reflect ourselves, and we can see ourselves in the 16th century, but sort of reflect that back onto like a contemporary everyday life, it's great. I love it.
No, right. It feels so contemporary. And you mentioned Craig, who worked on Romeo and Juliet and The Great Gatsby and Moulin Rouge with Baz Luhrmann, and this kind of very stylized take is very much in that vein, no?
Absolutely. I mean, again, Craig's writing is incredible on the show, and which is what first sort of drew me to the project was his style of writing and what he sort of envisioned for the project. And that's exactly that. The show just really embodies this beautiful visual which sort of flows with the theme of Shakespeare and definitely him in his younger days. We see Shakespeare as this dusty sort of old guy. I mean, before I even joined the show, I wasn't really interested, because Shakespeare, for me, during school, as I'm sure you guys can imagine, is kind of boring. Like, for me, I was not interested, but I read the script, and once I learned more about Shakespeare, you really come to appreciate him as such a wonderful artist, sort of like, for his day, he sort of speaks for the people, sort of like how we would look at like Jay-Z or someone like that, and I think that's what this show truly embodies, yeah.
You mentioned Jay-Z, and there is a real sort of love of language in this show, and there's almost a little rap-off, like a verse-off in the pilot episode, and it's so fun to see Shakespeare and all the characters play with language here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you look back on history, you don't really see it as something of you can't really see yourself in that. It seems like a very foreign concept, especially like the 16th century. But again, with this show, it takes that and you can see yourself in these situations and you can see yourself in these circumstances. And yes, in the pilot, there is a little poetry rap battle, which is one of my favorite sort of scenes of the entire series.
It's really good. So you play a real historical figure, Alice Burbage. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, what's funny is there's sort of true to history. There's not a lot on Alice Burbage in sort of the history books. She's definitely a real person. She was the daughter of James Burbage, the sister of Richard Burbage, who I'm sure some of you know is like the king of theatre of that time. But what Craig's done is taken her as a historical figure and sort of used her as a foundation and sort of an inspiration of a lot of strong women at that time. And as well, for me, as an actress, I was able to model and draw inspiration from sort of the women that I look up to nowadays to draw on her. But she's a very strong, independent young woman who taught me a lot about myself actually in the process, it was really great.
Did you have any sort of input on the character, given that, we were not tied to text? The show is not trying to be the most historically accurate Shakespeare show around.
As you can see, yeah. No, absolutely. What's funny about my sort of process during the show is we did the pilot about 1.5 years ago, and I was 17 at the time, and I was kind of young. I was a lot younger than the actual character's age, which is around the 20s, and I'm 19 now. Not that much older, but at the time I was still sort of like a young woman, and I had to find my own feet during the pilot and during the rehearsal process, and I really got to have a lot of input into how Alice finds her feet as well. And there was a lot of relatability, and it was a long process and such a challenge. But similarly, as you'll see when you hopefully watch the series, she overcomes a lot of battles. Similarly, they really reflected and mirrored my own life at the same time, which was pretty special. Yeah.
So 17 years old, you're shooting a TNT drama pilot.
Yeah, it was wild.
How does this even happen?
It was very wild. I got the script January last year or December, I think it would have been. And like I said, I was like, Shakespeare. I was like, I don't know. I was working on something else at the time. And I was like, I don't know if I have time. And they were like, no, like read the script. And I was like, okay. So I read it. And obviously I was like, get me in this show. But yeah, I was super young. I was 17. Young girl, sort of had to take it all on at once, but Shaker and Craig really put me under their wing. They were incredible and have genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, changed my life, which I think is a big thing to say, but I really do mean that, yeah.
No, it sounds like such a special filming experience.
Oh, totally. We shot for 7 months in Wales, and it was also my first time living out of home. I just turned 18. I'd never lived out of home before, never lived abroad. Never lived away from my parents. I actually lived with a co-star of mine, Matthias, who plays my brother in the show, and he's very much like my brother in real life now. But it was an incredible experience. I was also one of the only females on the show, which was pretty hard. I was also the youngest, so a lot of firsts for me, a lot of first times. But it was like a big family. The filming experience was incredible. I think everybody came out of that, a better and a different person. So yeah.
Well, you feel that sort of family quality on screen because it really is a show about behind the scenes, what goes on at this theater. And I feel like it's all these theater kids essentially.
Oh, it totally is.
Drinking too much, having
Everyone
sex
is a
with
theater
each other.
kid. Maybe not that, but yes.
No, on screen.
Yeah. Absolutely, no, totally. The family that you see on screen is the family you see off screen. We were all cooped up in Wales, all missing our loved ones, but we kind of had each other, which was beautiful. But absolutely, the weekends were good fun, and that definitely translated to on screen. Yeah.
In the clip that we saw, you say something about how women in England are either good for ruling, bearing children, or whoring. And notions of gender and sexuality are so in flux in this time period.
Absolutely.
And your character Alice really faces some opposition. What are her challenges in this show, and how does she sort of overcome them?
Absolutely. Alice comes across a lot of challenges. I don't want to give anything too much away, but I think love is definitely a big sort of hurdle in her life, and not necessarily love for another man, which I think is really exciting, is that, she is Shakespeare's girlfriend, but she also is different. She's not just about Will. She has her own little thing going on, which I find is also super exciting. But she faces a love of theatre, which I think at the time, due to like the stereotypes of women, and she sort of breaks the mould and goes against the grain, which I think is super inspiring for a lot of sort of girls. I think there's a lot of pressure on young women in society to stick to the norms, and she definitely goes against that. But she overcomes a particular hurdle, I think, in episode 9, which is my favourite and also my favourite scene. So watch out for that.
You know, and there's so many theories about who Shakespeare was, and many people believe that, you know, it just wasn't one person. It could have been even a group of playwrights. And not to give too much away, but I think it's a really strong, bold choice to show how your character really influences Shakespeare's writing and possibly has a hand in the creation of these great works.
Absolutely. I think what's really beautiful about art, and particularly what this show really sort of speaks to, is that art is inspired by life. You know, life reflects art, art reflects life. And I think the exploration of that in this show particularly is we don't know history. We don't know. No one knows Will Shakespeare. There's no one who's met Will Shakespeare. And I think this sort of adaptation is sort of taking that and being like, what if he was like you and I? You know, Will Shakespeare, you know, anybody in this room could be the next Will Shakespeare. We don't know. But a matter of fact is he started as a young guy, basically, and he's stepped into London. He's left his family, his wife, his 3 children. He stepped into this new age sort of London and taken it by storm. And I think that 100%, it's all fresh and it's all new. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this world is so crazy. I mean, it's like a live fast, die young sort of scenario, and, you know, it's bloody, it's dirty. What, were you sort of surprised that this is the direction that they took to bring sort of Will Shakespeare to 2017?
Absolutely. It's very different. And I think as much as it's historically accurate, you know, the 16th century, they didn't have all the sort of technologies that we have today, or the medical advances as we do today. A lot of them had to live for the day. So everything that you see is very like, this could be our last day for all we know it. You know, the bubonic plague is also sort of like a theme in the show as well. You never know when that could hit. And that's a little bit hectic. But absolutely. But I think what the show does is that it uses the 16th century as a vehicle for us to model ourselves on and to view our own contemporary lives. And I think when you get to see something, you know, as foreign or as unknown, I guess, as the 16th century, it is easier to see yourselves in that. And I think what's beautiful is that it does that in this show. And I think as much as it stays true to the time in some aspects, it definitely adapts that modern day sort of colloquial sort of language, which is really true. Yeah.
Speaking of sort of the time period, I was surprised that, you know, speaking of like gender and sexuality, this show sort of embraces a queerness to it. That, you know, Shakespeare's rival playwright is a guy named Christopher Marlowe, and they have sort of a chemistry brewing.
I know.
And then you are also there, so it sort of creates this love triangle dynamic. What did you think about the inclusion of having a character that's pretty much openly gay, queer?
Yeah. Well, I think it's great and it's beautiful, and I think that it's definitely something that was an element. You know, I think that's not just new to the 20th century. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think that this show definitely sort of just embraces it, not as something different, but as something which is the norm, which it should be. Again, I think that's something that that this show does so well, is that it adapts a theme that maybe is a little bit more controversial now, but instead makes it the norm in the 16th century and allows us to sort of be like, hey, maybe we should do that too.
Yeah, I think it's a really bold, progressive choice that I think is definitely going to interest viewers and keep them around.
And it's very true to history. I think Shakespeare's sexuality is definitely sort of something that is up for debate, and I think there's a long way. There's very much, I don't want to give too much away, but there's so much of a journey, that he goes down, yeah.
And, you know, you mentioned Shakespeare, and you are the love interest here in parts. And the first time you guys meet, there's a little bit of a balcony scenario that's giving me some Romeo and Juliet vibes. Could
Indeed.
you be Juliet?
There's a little bit of inspiration there. No, actually, that first scene that you see Alice and Will was actually like one of my audition scenes, which was super exciting. Yeah. That one and the scene that you showed before when she talks about rearing children, queen and whoring, etc. That was also an audition piece. But yes, no, there's definitely, it takes inspiration. A lot of their relationship sort of inspires him to write what we know now as Romeo and Juliet. Yeah.
What was it like working with Laurie Davidson, who's also pretty new to the game as well,
This
right?
is his first job, can I just say? And you would never know. Him on set was like he would just grew up on set. You would never know that it's his first job. No, he was amazing. I think it was both, like, we had a lot of like firsts on this show definitely sort of together, which was beautiful. It was my first sort of big TV show over in the UK/the US. It was his first job, but I couldn't choose anybody better to work opposite with. He was truly wonderful, yeah.
You know, and sort of a line that's repeated throughout the show is how Shakespeare's plays really hold up a mirror to nature. You know, coincidentally, that was sort of the same phrase that was used when the artistic director at the Public Theater, which is right down the street, to defend this really controversial production of Julius Caesar that sort of made, I think, this show really relevant unexpectedly. Because if to tune in, the production sort of used Donald Trump as an avatar for Julius Caesar, causing a lot of controversy. And this show is very political in its own right.
Yeah.
What did you make of that whole incident?
Holding up a mirror to nature? Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what art's for. I think that's the point, is to express and reflect what's going on in our own lives and in society. And I think that, you know, we look back at history and we read books, you know, like we read, you know, Shakespeare, and in 100 years, I think, you know, we'll be looking back at history and we'll watch shows like this and we'll read articles like that, and that will be a true reflection of what was going on at the time. And I think that what is exciting is that people are really starting to take risks in what they create, and it's not a safe option. They're really just being like, this is what I think. And I think this show sort of embraces and sort of uses art as a mode of expression and a mode of like fighting against sort of the grain and the norm. And yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it is such an exciting time in theater and art, and actors and directors, I think, are really rising to the challenge.
Totally, and making really like political points, which is so exciting, and people are really starting to get around it and not sort of be scared of it or fear of it, but instead embracing it and using it to sort of change the world, per se.
Yes, Will is changing the world.
Woo!
And so we have a wonderful audience here today, and I believe we have some questions for you.
Sure, hit me.
Hi, Olivia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. My question for you is, since this show is all about theater, so it's two questions actually. One, would you consider going to theater? And which Shakespeare play would you like to be a part of, if you could?
Ooh. Yes. It's actually funny. When I joined the show, I'm not theater trained at all. I didn't go to drama school, but everybody else was. And I am ashamed to say this, but I had never seen a play before coming onto this show. Yes. But I did educate myself on theatre. So yes, I do definitely want to see theatre. I want to see more of it. I have Thursday, Friday off here, so I'm hoping to go and see some plays around here. My favourite Shakespeare play is probably Romeo and Juliet, for sure. It's a classic.
Come on, how
Like
could
all
you
Shakespeare
not?
plays, but it's more of a classic, yes.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi.
My question is, what was it like going back in time and sort of like reenacting the 16th century when we literally, like,
That's a good question.
with all these like media technology around you? How do you just like isolate yourself and bring your mind back in time?
Well, the sets that they had for the show were like incredible. The backlot in Wales, they had literally built like an entire world basically. So like, I'm not sure if you saw in the trailer, but there's like all these streets, and they would genuinely, you'd step on there and you felt like you're in the 16th century. And with all the extras and the costumes and just it was amazing. I think it was pretty easy given that the production design was super incredible, the costumes were amazing, and we had, you know, brilliant direction, and Craig was always on set, so any questions that we had were cleared up, but it was really easy. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the costumes, I have to mention, are incredible. It's
costumes are
like a
amazing.
high-fashion, Bowie-inspired 70s.
100%.
You know.
Yeah, what was super exciting also was that each of the characters, like their costumes reflected them and their sort of personal journey. I think I've said this before, Matthias's jacket, his like main costume jacket, I guess, for his character, had this incredible like embroidered lion on the back of it, and Richard Burbage is known as sort of the king of theatre, he comes to be, and historically as well, and like that's sort of what was reflective in his costume. A lot of my costumes, this is the first sort of costume you see Alice in, but her costumes transgress throughout the show in different colours, and each of them reflect a different time in her life. And I don't know much about the other people's characters, but the same thing with them too. It's outstanding, incredible.
You got one more question.
Hello.
Hi.
So prior to you filming this show, what Shakespeare plays have you read during school? And since after you're done filming, did you get to read a lot more Shakespeare?
I didn't get to read a lot more Shakespeare, but again, I'll bring it back to Romeo and Juliet because that's a classic and I love it. But no, I didn't do year 12 drama. I did do some drama in year 11 and obviously in English. But again, I can honestly say from the bottom of my heart, it was not something when I was younger that I was interested in at all whatsoever. Like, I'm so ashamed to say that now that I've learned so much more about Shakespeare. But I think that's what's kind of exciting about this show is that I'm sure a lot of young people can agree with me that it can seem kind of boring and he seems dusty and old, but just brace yourself because it's not. And this show really brings that to life and it is exciting. And his writing has really did really inspire the world. I mean, there's a reason that we're still doing his plays like 400 years later. So get around it, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, you do such an amazing job in this, and everyone is going to love and tune in.
Thank you so much.
So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Congrats on all your success.
Thank you very much.
Give it up for Olivia,
It's been a pleasure.
everybody.